Southwest Florida's newest game in town brings you all the NFL action that you're asking for. Lloyd and Kevin have all the news, updates, trades, and rumors from the NFL. Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on Sports Radio 102.9 The Game starts now.
Lloyd Vance's Insider Football is back for another week, a special Tuesday night edition. You know, it was Monday Night Football and the Eagles played, so I know a lot of friends and family wanted to watch that, and the result was not what they wanted. We're going to talk about all that. Kevin is on assignment since it's Tuesday, so we brought in our favorite summer intern, my son, Nate Vance. How you doing today?
Doing pretty good. Terrible loss for the Eagles last night, but we'll get into that.
Yeah, speaking of losses, I got to let everybody know, we're here on the Coastal Sports Network and 102.9 A Game. We're glad everybody's here with us, but everybody figures that we would talk about the Eagles right away and a bad loss for them. Well, I want to kick it off by talking about a bad loss for me. You know, he was our fantasy football guru all summer, and I doubted him. And then we played head-to-head this week. Nathan won 163.92. His team's called Sun God. He can tell me what that means. And my team, the Masters Disaster, lost to him. I scored 152.84 points, and I lost, everybody. And we lost because he had Jalen Hurts and he had Bijan. Yeah, I mean, seriously. How can you have both guys? So how'd you do it, Nate?
I mean, my team is just the best, man. I told you from the start. I know the most. I drafted the right people. And what is it now, like 4 straight years that I've beaten you?
Oh, he's, humble pie. I don't know if it's 4 straight years. We have my younger son, Braden, his brother in the mix too, my 16-year-old. But it's so much fun playing with these guys. I play with Nate and all his buddies from high school he played football with, and we have a lot of fun with it. I'm not like Kevin, though. He has 11 fantasy football teams. I don't even know how he manages all that mess and, guys playing against each other. But so, Nate, we'll kick it off and we'll talk about your team. Everybody knows he's a Buffalo Bills fan. Big story this week was Thursday night, and Tua Tagovailoa gets hit. He runs the ball. He's not a runner. He puts his head down. He never learned how to slide. Hamlin hits him. It wasn't a dirty hit. Goes down right away, puts his hand up, and you could tell right away, this is another concussion. 2022 flashbacks, kickoff right back in everybody's mind. What did you see from Tua in that game, and where did the Miami Dolphins go from here and the Bills?
Yeah, I just wanted to start out by saying that I wish Tua best of luck the rest of the year. I mean, no one wants to see a guy get injured over and over and over again, especially with concussions. That can be dangerous for his health down the rest of his life. But from a game standpoint, I mean, Tua, when he was in the game, he was losing them the game. He threw 3 interceptions, and he was just turning the ball over way too much and just giving the Bills short fields, and the Bills just took advantage of that the whole game. You saw the run game with James Cook. He had 78 yards for 3 touchdowns. He's looking like he's the real deal as a lead back for them. And then Josh Allen, what I talked about in the offseason all the time was that the new OC was just going to help him not turn the ball over as much. And you saw that in the game. He didn't have to play hero ball like he did last week against the Cardinals. And he was just efficient with the ball, didn't make any mistakes, and just game managed his way to a big win over the Dolphins.
Yeah, and Tua's now going to have – he's on IR, so he's going to be out the next 4 weeks. At a minimum, they're going to send him to neurologist. And everybody I've talked to around the league is saying he wants to keep playing. So, you would hope he would talk to his family, figure out for his health if this is the right thing. But with that large contract, and I think he's making about $54 million per season, I think he's going to keep playing. And Miami, they need him, but it's a very dangerous spot. We all know about CTE and the dangers around it. I knew some guys that knew Andre Waters, a guy who was from the Tampa, Florida area. And unfortunately, Andre was an Eagles great, and then later on he suffered badly from CTE and took his own life. So, you don't want to see that happen to somebody later on in his career. But football-wise, you're right. 2 or 3 interceptions. He was not getting it done. He's completing some of his passes, but was not getting the ball to his main receivers, Waddle and Hill. They had a really quiet game. Do you think the Dolphins will be able to recover with Skylar Thompson? I mean, he didn't look real good out there. They did sign Tyler Huntley from the Ravens practice squad today, and he's going to be in a regular season roster. But they said Thompson is going to get the start. So what do we think about Thompson, Dave?
Yeah, I remember from a couple years back when they played the Bills in the playoffs, Skylar Thompson wasn't that bad at all. I mean, if he plays under the system that Mike McDaniel runs, gets the ball out quick, gets it to these playmakers that they got, like Tyreek Hill, Devon Achane, and Jalen Waddle, I mean, I think he could be an average quarterback for them and maybe pick them up a couple wins like you're seeing Malik Willis do with the Packers right now. So I don't think their season's quite over yet. And then once they get Tua back, I mean, you know what the Dolphins are going to be. They're going to beat up on the bad teams, probably lose to all the good teams. So they could still make the playoffs, but it's going to be hard for them.
Now, Thompson's going to have to hold the fort down. I'm not as optimistic on him as you are. I think eventually they may have to go to Huntley, but Chris Greer, their general manager, as well as their head coach, McDaniel, they do think, they can win some games with him. And you're right, they have some very good pieces around him. You got to have some better offensive line, though, by Armstead and the rest of the guys up front. They were allowing Tua to get hit a little too much, in my opinion. So when we look at Miami's schedule, they're 1-1. The NFL has a whopping 13 teams that are 1-1, and they all are still in the mix around the NFL. Miami they're at Seattle. They're going to have Tennessee on a Monday night, at New England. Then they have their bye in week 6. So I think after that, they're going to try to get maybe Tua back there at Indianapolis, Arizona, at Buffalo again. So, there's some games in there. They're going to keep playing. As I always say, the NFL train keeps moving. It never stops for anybody, whether you're injured or suspended or you're holding out. It's a week in and week out league. They're going to move on to the next guy up and move on to the next week. So all the best to Tua. Hopefully that will work out for him. The other big story we're definitely going to talk about here, I was on earlier on Rich Quinones' show here on the Coast Sports Network and SR 1029, The Game. We talked a lot about last night's game, Nathan. The Philadelphia Eagles lose inexplicably 22-21 in agonizing fashion to the Falcons. Now, some people may say glass half full, but I got to go glass half empty here. In terms of Nick Sirianni and his staff, I thought they did a very poor job in terms of this game, in terms of not only clock management and play calling. The defense just did not show up in this one. They got pushed around all over the field. Can the Eagles recover from this one, and what was your take on this game last night?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I think the Eagles can recover. If you look at the NFC East right now, the Giants don't seem to be a threat. Same with the Commanders. They're a young team rebuilding with Jaden Daniels. Their only competition is the Cowboys, and you just saw the Cowboys get smoked at home by the Saints. So I think they can definitely recover. They got to fix – the biggest problem for them, though, right now is they got to fix that defense. That secondary, I mean, you saw that at the end of the game. Kirk Cousins wasn't really having that great of a game all game, and then he just goes down the field 6 plays in about 30 seconds with no timeouts and just puts one in the end zone to Drake London. I mean, that's just unacceptable. And then you were talking about Nick Sirianni and his questionable play call, and I think that was a pretty good play call to Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley just got to execute that catch and ice that game out right there. And then on top of that, the Eagles get the ball back with about 37 seconds left and one timeout. Jalen Hurts made a nice throw to the middle of the field, and then he tried to play hero ball too much, threw it in a double coverage at the end of the game, and Jesse Bates picks it off for the win. So, I mean, Jalen Hurts has to be definitely better with his decision-making for the Eagles to go far this season, but I think they'll definitely bounce back next week.
Yeah, Nate, that was a great point because I was on with Rich, and we got so fixated talking about the defense and the play calling and everything. Hurts, solid game, 23 of 30, 183 yards, had one TD, one interception, as you said, late. He ran the ball 13 times and had some nice runs there. He's still getting hit a little too much, in my opinion. You don't want your quarterback getting hit where he's not. He did slide, which I liked. He looked like he finally learned that baseball hook slide on one play, but he's still getting hit, whether it's the tush push and diving over the middle. So you need to watch that. But the Eagles overall, I think the biggest thing other than Hurts and playing hero ball and all that, it's, as you said, the defense. They allowed 385 total yards and 152 yards rushing at 5.4 yards per carry. So it just showed you they had no fear over the middle of this defense. I wanted to talk about in that defensive line and get your opinion on their draft picks. They have, Jordan Davis, Carter, Dean. All these guys are from Georgia, and they have not lived up to billing. Do you think they can coach up this defensive line, or this is going to be a problem all season for the Eagles?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a problem all season. I mean, you look back to the last couple games last year when they went on that losing streak, and the main problem for them during that streak was they couldn't stop the run. And then you start this season up. Josh Jacobs has a good game against you in Week 1, and then Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier were absolutely gashing them all night long, picking up. I think Bijan Robinson ended up averaging about 7 yards carry. Tyler Algier averaged about 5 yards carry. So, I mean, they just can't stop the run. I don't think they have the personnel to stop the run. I mean, they have Jalen Carter, who's a really good young D tackle. But besides that, Zach Bond had a really nice game Week 1, but really didn't show up last night. N'Kobe Dean makes splash plays here and there, but is inconsistent in the run game. So I think it's just going to be all season where that's just going to be one of their weak points. I mean, they've focused all this offseason mainly about upgrading the offense. They brought in Saquon Barkley, and that defense is just really young and is just making a lot of mistakes right now, and they can't really stop anybody.
Yeah, and everybody talked about Fangio coming over to the Eagles and bringing that pedigree, but Fangio, they talked him up like he was Bud Carson or Bill Belichick, somebody like that. And the guys I talked to in Miami, they all were saying, the Dolphins are kind of glad to get rid of him. So, he's supposed to be the savior of the Eagles defense, and Sirianni's he's going to be the puppet master here. He's going to allow Kellen Moore to run the offense and allow Fangio to run the defense. He's kind of in the background, a CEO type. He even pointed a finger at Kellen Moore and said, "Hey, he called that play to Saquon. It was just the non-execution." So, I want to watch that and see how that matriculates over the season. That was the 11th straight game that the Eagles allowed a rusher to go over 100 yards. So it just shows you, as Nate was saying, this could be a problem that the Eagles are going to have to work through all season. The Falcons only had a 7% chance when they got the ball, and I would have liked to seen them. The Falcons had no timeouts, try to run that ball, run the clock down, and then put the pressure on Kirk Cousins. Look, Kirk Cousins was 3-10 on Monday Night Football going into that situation. But he showed his moxie. I got to tip my cap to him. That was a great effort by him. And we'll see how they do. Now, the Eagles, the interesting thing is they're 1-1. So there's 13 teams at 1-1. Since everybody talked about the Eagles and where they are, Nate and I are going to play a game. We're going to play contender or fraud. So we're going to look at all the standings and where we are and just kind of look at it and say, okay, what is our true take on these guys? So you're here listening to Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 102.9 The Game on the Coast Sports Network. I'm here with Nate Vance, our football intern, and he is at Misericordia University. We're talking about contenders already. I know it's crazy. Everybody's like, all right, it's only 2 weeks, but you know what? Teams that start 2-0 since 2020 have a 79% chance of making the playoffs. 26 out of 33 teams. So that just shows you, these teams may be in good shape. So, Nate, I'll just start throwing these teams at you, and you give me your honest take. All right, 2-0. The LA Chargers, they have Jim Harbaugh taking over there. They seem to have a running game. I'm still not sure on Herbert. What do you think about the LA Chargers? Are they a contender, or are they going to be a fraud?
I think they're definitely a contender in the AFC. If you look how their team's built, they have a lot of guys on the defensive side of the ball, a lot of stars, and then that offense. Did you know that they had the 2 highest graded tackles from this week Rashawn Slater, and Joe Alt, the two highest graded tackles in all of football on one team, which is crazy. That running game with J.K. Dobbins is explosive. He's averaging the most yards per carry in the NFL right now. And Justin Herbert's all they're asking him to do, all Jim Harbaugh is asking him to do right now is just be a game manager and not turn the ball over and just be efficient with the ball. And that's what he's doing. So I think they're definitely a contender right now.
Yeah, and that's a great play. Alt he's incredible coming out of Notre Dame. Week one, you saw he did not allow any pressures, anything. He's one of those guys. He was able to step right on the field as a first year guy, and he's an impact maker. Slater, I've liked him for a long time. That line that's the way they're going to build this team inside out. So Harbaugh, he wants to run the ball. He wants these guys to be physical, and they defensively, he wants Bosa and the rest of those guys to make plays. So I would agree with you that I think the Chargers, and when you look at their schedule, I think their schedule is kind of favorable for them to have a good season. So
Yeah, they definitely have one of the easier
they're
schedules.
at Pittsburgh this week. We can kind of talk about them in a minute. Kansas City, that's going to be a fun one, week 4. They have their bye at Denver. Then they're at Arizona on a Monday night. They have New Orleans, at the Browns, Tennessee, Cincinnati, and then they're in week 12, they're at Baltimore. They have Baltimore on a Monday night. So, and that's going to be the Hard Bowl, which everybody's excited about, brother against brothers. But yeah, I would have to say the Chargers and the way they're running the football and just physical. I think they have a good chance of making the playoffs, and that would be one of 4 new. Every season since 1990, there's been 4 new teams in the playoffs. They could be one of them. All right, a team that last year really did. They surprised a lot of people, but this year not surprising anybody. Houston on Sunday Night Football, they were tough. They beat up the Bears, and I think this will be an easy one. Houston, with all the weapons they have, I have to say they're a contender. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I actually think that Houston, behind the Chiefs right now, is the best team in the NFL. I think that C.J. Stroud looks even better in this year. He's doing the same thing as he was doing last year, not turning the ball over, being highly efficient with the ball. Nico Collins looks like a solidified wide receiver one. And then you have Diggs and Tank Dell in there. They're a dangerous offense with also such an improved running game this year with Joe Mixon coming in from the Bengals. And you saw what he did week 1 against the Colts. I mean, he was just gashing them. He had 159 yards on the ground against the Colts. And then this week he gets hurt, but still, I mean, and that defense, D'Amico Ryans has some guys playing real ball out there. Last year they were kind of susceptible. They were kind of young. But this year they're getting pressure after the quarterback. They brought in Everson Griffin. The corners, Kamari Lassiter that they drafted had a pick against Caleb Williams in the game, and Derek Stingley has also had another pick. He's a lockdown corner. So I think they're a complete all-around team that has a definite shot to make the Super Bowl or win the Super Bowl this year.
Now they're interesting because I would like to see them play the Kansas City Chiefs, who kind of struggled of late, and you talk about Will Anderson and Daniil Hunter on that defensive line. Those guys are just physical. They beat up Caleb Williams. I mean, they were hitting him over and over again. He was pressured 29 times in that game and sacked several times. So I definitely think Houston is a contender. All right, this is an interesting one because everybody gets on me, and Rich has been harping on me. He calls them my Steelers. But I told him, I said the Steelers were going to be a good team this year. I know the way they're winning these games is ugly and everything and all that, and a lot of people don't believe in Mike Tomlin, but I just think he's going to find a way to win games ugly, which they did once again this week. Steelers, contender or fraud?
I mean, they're definitely a contender to make the playoffs and win their division, but they're fraudulent, man. I mean, you can't win in the NFL with your quarterback as Justin Fields. I mean, he's just not a high level NFL quarterback. I know that defense is ranked best in the league right now, but Justin Fields is just checking the ball down. He's just game managing right now, which I guess is good for right now. But when they need someone to make plays in big spots, I don't think that he can do that for that team. You look at what he's been doing the past 2 weeks. He will not throw the ball down the middle of the field. I think he's just scared because last year that's where he turned the ball over most, and he will just not throw it in the middle of the field right now. I think defensive coordinators will start to key on that, and they'll start to pick up on those tendencies, and then maybe they'll have to go to Russ, or I don't know with that whole quarterback situation what they're going to do, but I just don't see them winning a playoff game this year.
Yeah, an interesting thing with them, Russ has a calf injury, and I think, Nate, they're just going to stick with Fields because, as you said, they're winning games. It may not be pretty, but they're going to stick with Fields. And this week, we're really going to find out. They play the Chargers this week in Pittsburgh, and they're both 2-0, so somebody's got to go. So we'll see how that's going to turn out. And Fields is going to have to make some plays though. This handing it off to Najee Harris and a check down to Freiermuth that you were talking about. They did have a deep pass to Pickens in this game, and it was called back for a holding penalty. Now Broderick Jones, their young tackle, he's had all sorts of problems, and that may be their Achilles heel. And it's going to be tough for them to block Bosa and Mack in this game, and the rest of the guys, Derwin James on that defense. So we'll get to our picks later on, but I'm tending to think the Chargers may finally expose the Steelers. But the thing is with the Steelers, TJ Watt is a game wrecker. I mean, so you never know how he could factor in there. All right. We're talking about contenders and frauds here on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, the Coastal Sports Network. Thanks for joining us. I'm here with Nate. This team is your team, the Buffalo Bills. I think I already know the answer. Do you think they're a contender or frauds? I like that Cook is running the football downhill, and he's changed kind of the complexion of his team. I'm still not sure about his receivers. The defense has a lot of moving pieces, but I do like what Oliver and those guys are doing up front. So I'll say wait. I'm going to put a to be continued on my vote. What do you think about the Bills?
Yeah, I think they'll definitely win the AFC East this year, but I'm not putting my stock into them again like I do that I've done the past years and just watch my team get its heart ripped out by the Kansas City Chiefs or the Bengals or some other team. I mean, they do look good right now. I got to see them go up against better teams. I mean, the Bills are have beaten Tua 6 times and only lost once. So I mean, they own Tua. I need to see them beat a good team, but like you were saying, James Cook running the ball downhill, and Sean McDermott is. It doesn't matter. We have a lot of injured people on the defense right now, but it really doesn't matter because Sean McDermott has always coached them up to be a top 10 defense, and with Josh Allen back there, you always got a chance. So I got to put them as a contender.
Yeah, now, an interesting thing with Buffalo, their schedule is going to get interesting. They have Jacksonville this week on Monday Night Football. There's actually 2 Monday Night Football games. That's one of them. Then they're at Baltimore week 4, at Houston. I'll be looking forward to that game in week 5. Then they're back on Monday Night Football again in week 6. I think that's against the Jets. So a lot of big games coming up. We'll see. But yeah, I'm going to be continue with them. Now, this is an interesting team, Nate. They're 2-0, one of the surprise teams around the National Football League. They've really kind of beat up on little sisters of the poor, in my opinion. They beat Denver and they beat New England. So Seattle Seahawks, what are we thinking? Are they a contender or pretender? This week they play Miami that we kind of talked about earlier. And it's a home game for them. It's very tough to play up there with the 12th man. So what about Seattle?
Yeah, I definitely think the Seattle Seahawks are frauds. I don't really see them. They could be a wild card team, but I don't really see them making the playoffs this year. I think Mike McDonald's doing a good job with the defense, getting them back into shape like they were all those years ago with Pete Carroll. But I mean, how far is Geno Smith really going to take you? And they, like you said, they've been beating up on these bad teams, the Patriots and the Broncos, both rebuilding teams. And I just don't think that they can beat the upper echelon teams enough to be a contender. So I would have to put them as frauds.
Now, the interesting thing, Nate, is in week 4, they're going to Detroit. So I think that's really going to tell us everything we need to know about this team. They have had Kenneth Walker with an abdomen injury, and Charbonnet, he had some nice passes that he caught here and there. He scored a touchdown against New England, but they need more in terms of their rushing attack. And their receivers, though, Jackson Smith and Jigma, is really coming on right now and playing really good at DK Metcalf. And then they have Lockett on key third down. So Seattle does have some pieces there, but as you said, I'm going to wait and see on them. I'm not going to say fraud, but there definitely could be a pretender. I want to see them against San Francisco. Now, San Francisco, they've had a lot of injuries. They just lost Debo Samuel. Christian McCaffrey is on the IR. You're starting to wonder if they are having that Super Bowl hangover jinx. This
Yeah,
team's interesting. Oh, go ahead, Nate.
yeah. I was just gonna get into the Niners, but
Yeah,
it's
go ahead.
crazy that that Brock Purdy is undefeated against all NFC teams except for the Vikings. He's 0-2 in his career against the Vikings. So it seems like the Vikings and Kevin O'Connell have his number, and we're gonna really see what Brock Purdy can do now that uh, Debo Samuel is out and Christian McCaffrey is out. All these people that say he's just a game manager and he's just good because he has all these weapons. We're gonna really see what he can do without all. He'll still have Brandon Ayuk and Kittle and Jordan Mason's running the ball really hard, but we're gonna see what Brock Purdy can really do over these next couple weeks.
Yeah, yeah, the Niners are definitely a team we got to look at. The way they played against Minnesota, you're starting to wonder. You're like, okay, is because teams that typically lose the Super Bowl, they have some tough times due to defections, injuries, and you're seeing a lot of this. So they they're at the Rams, who are also very beat up. New England, Arizona, at Seattle. They play Kansas City week 7. So we're really going to find out about the Niners. Right now, they look like they could be pretenders now. In our listing area down here in Southwest Florida, we have a lot of Tampa Bay Buccaneers fans and listeners. This team is extreme. You know, I I didn't see this coming. I thought this was Atlanta Falcons division. Maybe the Saints would fight one of them. I thought the Bucks would take a step back, but they've done the last 3-4 years is win this division, and it's looking like they have a good chance to do this. And it's because of Baker Ball. Are the Tampa Bay Bucks for real? Are they contenders or pretenders?
I mean, they got to be for real. I mean, they made it to the divisional round last year. I know they were only 9-8. They beat up on a bad Eagles team, but they played that Lions team pretty hard. I mean, it came down to the last drive of the game. Baker lost it on an interception, but Baker has come back this year. The first 2 games this season, he's playing like an MVP right now. I mean, I don't think anybody saw this coming. And like you were saying, everybody picked the Falcons in the offseason. I was one of those people, and I think it's because people are just tired of the Buccaneers. I mean, they're just 9-8 the past couple years. They win the division. The division hasn't been very good, but you see all these teams in this division now that are good, and the Bucks are one of them. I mean, you got Antoine Winfield on the defense that holds it down back there. They only allowed 16 points to the Lions this week, which I thought was pretty good. Todd Bowles is doing a great job with the defense. And then you look at the offense, Liam Cohen comes in, and they didn't lose a beat after they lost Dave Canales. And Baker's playing even better. They got Chris Godwin, who's the number one receiver right now in the league in yardage terms, and they're playing really good ball right now. So there's definitely contenders.
Yeah, and the interesting thing with Tampa Bay Buccaneers is they have a winnable game this week. They have Denver coming into Tampa. They need to take care of business. Don't look past them because they have a huge game after that. It's the rematch with the Philadelphia Eagles from the playoffs last year. It's in Tampa again, week 4. So I know a lot of people will be gearing up for that one, but I definitely would have to say the Buccaneers right now are for real. And the way Baker's playing, as I said, he's not turning the football over. He's leaning on White. His receiver group is a lot of people don't talk about these guys, but Chris Godwin, he has had a really good start of the season. It's funny because Nate offered to me in a trade early on. I said, he's not going to do anything this season. Well, what do I know? I mean, Godwin's having a very good season. Mike Evans is going to get his 1,000 and possibly 7 touchdowns as usual. And the defense is pulling it together, even though, as we said, Winfield Jr. is a little banged up, and they have Vita Vea and the rest of those guys. So Tampa, it's going to be fun to see if they can keep this thing rolling, especially as they move towards week 4 against the Eagles. We're here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, the Coast Sports Network. We're talking about contenders and frauds, teams. We're looking at the standings. Right now, we're on the teams that are 2-0. This team, hey, they're going for the 3-peat. And the Kansas City Chiefs are 2-0. They look terrible against the Cincinnati Bengals. Some people are saying the refs bailed them out with that late PI call. Mahomes' second lowest passing day in his career. And you're just starting to wonder, is Travis Kelce, you know, is it almost time for him to step away from the game and go toward Taylor Swift? So, what do we think about the Kansas City Chiefs? Are they real? I picked them to go three-peat, but I'm not feeling real good about that pick right now.
Yeah, I could never say that they're not contenders, but they did not look good in that game against the Bengals. And as I play safety in football, and as a DB, that was not a PI call, and they did get bailed out by the refs. And the Chiefs, they got the refs in their back pocket. I feel like, but besides that, I mean, you can't pick against the Chiefs. Last year they were terrible. They when it comes playoff time, you know what they're going to do. You know what they're about. They're Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, and Travis Kelce. I think Travis Kelce is trying to preserve himself for the postseason. And that's why you're not going to see him put big regular season numbers up this year. And that defense hasn't lost a beat. I mean, they lose Snead, but their corners are still playing lockdown defense. Steve Spagnuolo is one of the best defensive minds in the game. So they're definitely my pick to win the Super Bowl as well. And I think they'll do great things this year.
Yeah, they didn't look good, but they got the W. And this time of year, I tell everybody, all you want to do is stack W's as a team. There's no style points. 1 point victory is just as good as a 40-point victory when it comes time to count up, playoff seeding and everything. So the Chiefs, they know they have some things to clean up. Obviously, the injury with Pacheco breaking his leg is going to be kind of big for this team. But they are at Atlanta this week. That's on Sunday Night Football. So I think number 15, Patrick Mahomes, who will be ready to play. He typically does not have two bad games in a row. So they're at the Chiefs, at the Chargers. Then they have New Orleans on a Monday night, and then they have their bye. So a lot more football to be played by the Kansas City Chiefs. But as long as you have number 15, I think they got to be contenders. A couple more 2-0 teams. The Minnesota Vikings, we talked about them a little bit earlier. Kevin O'Connell's doing a great job with this team. Sam Darnold, a guy who Rich Q I talk to all the time, he's been killing Darnold for a long time, said he's been done and everything. But they found something with him, and as long as Jefferson's healthy, I know he got a quad contusion this week. I think the Vikings can possibly sneak in one of those wild card spots. So Vikings contender, pretender.
Well, they're definitely a contender right now. If you look, you were one of those people that always thought that Sam Darnold was a good player, and I always used to kill you and tell you that he was not an NFL quarterback. And then you see him come into this system with Kevin O'Connell, and they call him the tall Sean McVay. That's what everybody online calls him, and he's just one of the best offensive minds in the game. And he's just helping Sam Darnold be a great quarterback right now and leading his team to victories. And then on the other side of the ball, you got Brian Flores, who I think is one of the best defensive minds in the game, and he has this defense just on straight lockdown right now. And you saw what they did against the Niners, held them to only 17 points. And I just think they're a well coached, well rounded team with the best receiver in the league on their team, and they have a good offensive line as well. I think they're definitely a contender.
In Minnesota, they're one of the surprise teams, and I thought maybe it'd be Washington that jumps out and surprises everybody and gets in the playoff mix, but it's surprisingly right now it's the Vikings, and we're going to find out this week. They have Houston. The game is in Minnesota, so they're stepping up in class here. I know they beat the Niners, and if they can beat the Texans in back-to-back weeks after beating the Niners, that's going to really show you that they're the real deal. And a guy you didn't talk about is Aaron Jones coming over from the Packers. He is running the football extremely well for them. They will get Hawkinson back soon at the tight end position. The thing is with them is their defense, but Flores has done a nice job with them, even though they've had some defections, and they're going to be fun to watch. Right now, they're leading the NFC North. Now, it's going to be interesting. Can they hold off the Lions, and then what happens with the Packers when Jordan Love comes back, if he ever does so? Right now, I'll say to be continued on the Vikings. The last 2-0 team Nate and I will talk about in contender pretender is the New Orleans Saints. Now, right now they're looking like a contender because they've scored 91 points in 2 games, the 4th best production in NFL history. What are we thinking about the Saints? I know a lot of it is predicated on Derek Carr, who he's an inconsistent quarterback throughout his career. So what are we thinking about the Saints?
Yeah, I don't really know what to make of the Saints because I thought they were a dead team this year. I thought Dennis Allen was going to get fired at the end of the year. I thought they weren't going to be a very good team. Then they come out here with Clint Kubiak and a whole new offense run. They ran motion at the lowest rate in the NFL last year. You see them being so much more creative this year with so much more motion, getting the ball to Shaheed down the field, and Alvin Kamara turning back the clock, looking like his old former self in his prime, and just having a monster day against the Cowboys. And I don't really know what to make of that team, but right now you would have to call them a contender. And I mean, if you look at this crazy stat, Derek Carr is 30th in pass attempts and leads the NFL in passing yards right now, which is just insane and shows you how efficient this offense is being right now. So I don't know what to make of them right now, but they seem like they're on the up and up right now.
Yeah, and then the thing with the Saints is they got a huge game. They're hosting the Philadelphia Eagles, and everybody's going to see which team is ready to step up. And if the Eagles lose that game, the Eagles will be 1-2, and there's even more question marks around him. The big thing is Rashid Shaheed. Can they cover him with that secondary that's just been bludgeoned? And Darius Slay is not looking like the same guy. He's about, 33, 34. He's getting a little long for a corner. Q Mitchell does look like a very good draft pick. We'll see what he has for the Eagles. And Cooper DeJean, he's been a little banged up. We'll see. But the Eagles secondary, we talked about at the beginning of the show that this is going to be a huge test against the Saints. So I'm very interested to see which team really steps forward and kind of the other one fades into the background. So we're talking about contender pretender here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football. We went through all the 2-0 teams. I'll just throw a couple 1-1 teams. There's 13 1-1 teams. So that just kind of shows you the parity, Nate. And some of these guys, though, they're going to kind of fall by the wayside. So we're trying to figure out which one, especially 1-1. The Chicago Bears, they won ugly week one. Caleb Williams, I want to get your take on him as a young guy and what the young folks are saying about him. He just, I don't know. He looks a little lost to me. And the thing is, Eberflus is supposed to be a defensive coach. I don't know about their offensive game plan, and sometimes he's forcing the football when he doesn't need to. And there's not much of a rushing attack there. So what are we thinking in terms of Chicago Bears? Are they contenders? They're pretenders? What are you thinking, Nate?
Yeah, they're pretenders. I was high on the Bears coming into the season, but Caleb Williams, like you were saying, he just looks lost out there. I mean, there's no creativeness in this offense with Shane Waldron coming over from the Seattle Seahawks, and I just think that they're a bad offense right now. I think he needs to get Keenan Allen back, and I think once he gets Keenan Allen back, he'll do a little bit better having him as a safety blanket because he really needed that Sunday night against the Texans because his O-line was abysmal, and he was just facing pressure the whole game, and he was trying to do too much. And those two interceptions he had, like I was saying, he was trying to do too much, and he just threw the ball up twice, and the two Texans corners came down with picks. So I think right now you would have to call him a pretender. But if Caleb Williams can get his act together, I mean, this offense has so many pieces and so many weapons that they could be a scary team. But I think the first thing in priority is to get Caleb Williams more easier plays and targets to his receivers, and they got to fix that O-line.
Yeah, the O-line definitely was having some difficulty, and they've tried to fix that over the last couple of drafts, but I think they may be picking the wrong guys. So it's Chicago. Everybody's talking about them because they were in Hard Knocks, and they're a big story, and it's great. But they have not had much of a running game other than Caleb Williams. He led the team in rushing yards this week with 47 yards, and DeAndre Swift. It's interesting because the Eagles let him go. And he goes to the Bears, and you thought, okay, he's going to step forward. But he's having problems running between the tackles, and you wonder what they're going to be able to do with him. And the receivers, yeah, Keenan Allen has a heel injury. DJ Moore, he looks like his main guy that he's trying to throw the football to, but it's not plays down the field. They need a Dunzier to step up as well. Don't forget, he was a first-round pick as well. He had a big drop in the end zone of a potential touchdown. So, the Bears, yeah, I'd have to say right now, yeah, they're 1-1, but they're a fortunate 1-1. They're at Indianapolis. They have the Rams, Carolina, and then they play Jacksonville over in England. So, the schedule, if they get their stuff together, they may have a chance. But right now, I'd have to say Chicago is a fraud. Now, this next team, this is for all our Philadelphia relatives. We know how much they love this team. My brother actually is a Philadelphian who's a Dallas fan. He's a cockroach, as some people call him, Angel. These Dallas fans living in Philly. What do we think about Dallas? They just got the doors blown off them by the Saints. And yeah, Jerry Jones is giving money out. Dak's now a $60 million quarterback, and you have CeeDee Lamb getting the bag, and I guess eventually Michael Parsons will get it too. But what are we thinking in terms of Dallas? My biggest thing is they cannot run the football. Zeke, I always like Zeke ever since Ohio State, but he's looking washed, man.
Yeah, the Cowboys are pretenders. I mean, this first off with the defense. I mean, they have a couple of good pieces on there. Uh, Trayvon Diggs and Michael Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence. But their main issue is their other corner spot, and they were just getting burnt over the top by Shaheed and Chris Olave and all these guys. And their big thing last year was that they beat all these teams at home last year. And if they're not winning games at home, I mean, then they're just not going to be a good team this year because they're not a good road team statistically over the past couple years. So I would definitely call them pretenders.
Yeah, and this week they have, like, I just watch pro wrestling all the time. This is the loser leaves town match this week. They're playing the 0-2 Ravens, and whatever team loses this game, I think their season's pretty much going to be on life support. So that's going to be interesting in week 3. And as you said, Dallas, everybody says they're America's team and they're the biggest show out there, but right now you have to say they're just too inconsistent. Yeah, as good as they looked in week 1, beating Cleveland Browns in Cleveland, they looked terrible. The game was over by the first quarter against New Orleans Saints. So you just wonder, okay, which Dallas team is going to step up? So you have the Ravens, then they're at the Giants. That's on a Thursday night. They have this at Pittsburgh, which I'll be interested to see. The Detroit, and then in week 7 they have their bye, and then are at San Francisco week 8. So they have a mix of some tough games in there, and Jerry Jones really got to figure this situation out. Right now, I kind of agree with you that they're kind of fraudulent. I'll throw another team at you, a couple more that are 1-1. The Detroit Lions. Now, that was an enjoyable game. It was 20-16 that they lost to the Bucks, and the thing was, Goff just looked terrible in this game. I picked him actually to be my MVP this season. What are we thinking in terms of the Lions? I expected them to go far. Is this an anomaly, or is this something that Lions fans need to worry about?
I think it is an anomaly. I think the OC was just getting too cute last game and was trying to throw the ball with Jared Goff way too much. And Dan Campbell wants them to be a ground and pound team with their 2 good running backs, David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. And I think they got away from that game plan. Granted, they were losing a lot of this game, but that's what they are. They're a smash mouth team, and I think they needed to run the ball more. Jared Goff is a good quarterback. Don't get me wrong. I think he's a top 10 quarterback, but he's more of a system quarterback that works well off of play action and all that stuff. So I think they need to get that run game going in order for Jared Goff to play good. So I think they need to rely on Jared Goff a little less and start running the ball more like they did last year. And I definitely think they're contenders still.
Yeah, and the thing is, Aaron Glenn has got to make sure that secondary, they're having problems back there. Arnold is still learning on the job. I think he's going to be a good corner, but he had some problems. Or they got to lean on that offensive line. As you were saying, Jahmyr Gibbs only had 13 rushes in this game. He did go 13 for 84, but Goff threw it 55 times. That's just way too much passing. And the interesting thing was, Nate, Amon-Ra St. Brown, you felt like, he's kind of quiet in this game. And in week 1, he didn't do a lot. Is he healthy, or what's going on with him?
Yeah, well, he had a big stat line this week. He had 11 catches for about 120 yards this week. He had 19 targets, which is just insane production. But yeah, he got hurt and limped off the field at the end of the game. They said it was a soft tissue injury, and Dan Campbell said that he'll be ready to go for next week. So I'm not too worried about that for them. Plus, they got Jamison Williams right now, who's been balling out. So I'm not too worried about it if he has to sit out 1 week.
Yeah, and the thing is, Jamison Williams is just – they may have found a gem there. He did not play a lot. We know about the suspension for the gambling, and he came back, and he's just a flyer. I remember him at Alabama. He may have been one of the best out of that group that came out, that receiving core that they had. So, good test for them against the Bucs. That kind of came up short. They had a tough physical game, not that far removed from the Rams week one. They're at Arizona, which is a game interested in. Seattle on a Monday night. They have their bye. Then they're at Dallas, at the Vikings. So we're going to find out real quick. And I know Dan Campbell was kind of apologetic of his play calling and said he should have did some things differently. So I think the Lions will bounce back and definitely I say they're still a contender. They were my pick to play the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. We'll see how that turns out. We're talking about teams that are contenders and pretenders here on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 102.9 The Game. Coastal Sports Network. I'll throw one more 1-1 team at Nate, and then we'll start talking about some of these 0-2 teams, and then we'll talk about Week 3 coming up around the National Football League. Nate, now it's funny because Kevin every week he says, "Oh, Nate loves him. This is his guy, Kyler Murray." What do you think about the Arizona Cardinals? They look pretty good against the Rams, and Marvin Harrison Jr. said, "Hello, everybody." He had 4 catches, and he had 2 touchdowns on 2 of those catches, and one of them was a bomb. So, do you think the Cardinals are a pretender or a contender, and where do they go?
Yeah, I think that they're definitely in play for a wild card spot this year. I mean, I told Kevin Kyler was one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and look what he did. He went out there against the Rams and had a perfect passer rating. He had 260 plus yards and 3 touchdowns. Also had 50 plus rushing yards on the ground. You look at this offense. They got Trey McBride. They got James Conner, who's running the ball efficiently, and they got Marvin Harrison, who, like you said, he had 4 catches, 130 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I mean, this is a scary offense the way Kyler Murray's playing, and that defense ran by Jonathan Gannon. I mean, Jonathan Gannon, I thought was always a good defense coordinator for the Eagles. He doesn't really have necessarily the best personnel in Arizona, but if he can scheme some things together and keep that defense around league average, then I could definitely see them as a playoff team this year.
Yeah, and that defense is interesting because Budda Baker, he plays safety like you do, and he's everywhere for that defensive unit. They don't have a lot of playmakers. I think they have Collins too as well on that defense. They've done a nice job the past couple of weeks, and they're a physical group. They're going to hit you. They played Buffalo pretty tough in week 1. Yeah, that's a tough place to play, going all the way across the country, and they lost the game. But they showed you against the Rams their physicality. Now this week we're going to see they play the Detroit Lions. Then they have Washington, at San Francisco, at Green Bay, and then they're on Monday Night Football against the Chargers. So I'll say be continued on the Cardinals, because if they step forward, then you got to wonder about the Niners. We kind of touched on them earlier. All right, and for all our listeners, the Eagles, what are we thinking? Are they contenders or pretenders? Last night, I got to tell you, the way that defense played, they're looking like pretenders. And if they don't make the playoffs, or they start losing again, like they lost 6 or 7 games last season, and they lost in the playoffs to Tampa Bay, there are going to be a lot of upset people here in Philadelphia area where I am. What are you thinking in terms of the Eagles?
Yeah, I know I'm a little higher on the Eagles than you are. I still think that they're contenders. I think last night they had the game the whole time, and then they made a couple bad mistakes and they lost the game. I still think they're contenders. That offense is a top 5 offense in the league. Vic Fangio needs to work some things out with that defense. That's for sure. But I definitely think that in that division they're going to win around 12 games. And I think they'll be just fine sitting at a 2nd or 3rd seed. So I think they're still contenders.
So everybody in Philly, get off the Ben Franklin Bridge. Nate says they're going to win 12 games. Calm down. We'll see. That's Sirianni. That I just don't know if he is CEO material, but maybe I think things are getting set up where you may see Kellen Moore kind of take more of a lead of this offense, and then defensively they got to find some things to fix. But the Eagles are going to be fun because their schedule kind of is favorable. So, but They got two tough road tests coming up. They're at New Orleans this week, at Tampa Bay. They have their bye. They have Cleveland, at the Giants, at Cincinnati, Jacksonville, at Dallas. So they have some games there, a mix of games winnable and some tougher ones. So I'll say right now they are still contenders. I think they still win the NFC East. I think it's their year. Let's not forget in NFC East every season since '04, there's always been a new champion. Last year Dallas won a division, and I think this year it's going to be the Eagles. Obviously, I know Rich Q's probably listening. Hey, Rich Q, we know the Giants have no chance. Um, what about Washington? Do we think Washington? Yeah, Jaden Daniels is a human highlight reel. He just broke RG3's 2-game rushing record for a rookie quarterback. Um, he makes plays, man. And the only thing is, you got Zach Ertz and Austin Eckler. There's not a lot of pieces around him. But what do you think in terms of Washington? Are they going to be a good story, or is this just some early season hype?
I think it's definitely just some early season hype. I think Jaden Daniels is going to be an excellent quarterback in the NFL. If you look at him right now, he's being highly efficient. He's running the ball, making plays, and I just don't think that they could be a good team this year just because of their defense. I mean, they have probably the worst secondary in the NFL, and I mean, they let Daniel Jones have a good game against them, and everybody knows how you saw Daniel Jones week one, all the Giants fans all mad at him and everything, and they want Daniel Jones out of there, and Daniel Jones went out there and had a good game against them. Malik Neighbors went 10 for 127 and a touchdown on him. The only reason they won that game was because the Giants didn't have a field goal kicker and had to go for two every single time. So I definitely think that the Commanders are not a very good team, but I think Jaden Daniels is on pace right now to win Rookie of the Year. He's going to have a really great season. I just don't see their team being very good.
Yeah, I think they're going to. I had them sneaking in maybe in that 7th spot, but yeah, they're going to need to get some. They're going to need to win some games that you were like, nah, they probably wouldn't have a chance. And it's going to be a lot on the quarterback's shoulders. The thing with Jaden Daniels is he's got to buckle that helmet. He's got to learn to slide. I still think he gets hit way too much. And you don't want him ending up like a Cam Newton where he's so beat up physically from running that he can't pass. But I think you're right in terms of their overall roster. There's something to be desired for. They got some work to do this off season. Bring in some more talent, put him around him. But he is going to be an exciting player to watch. And we're talking about contenders and pretenders here on Lloyd Vance Inside Football on 102.9 The Game. Coastal Sports Network, thanks for being with us on a Tuesday night. Different than our normal Monday night, but the Eagles played, so we moved it back at night. I'm here with Nate Vance, my son, and fantasy football guru. He just proved it. He beat my butt this week. We'll see how we do. We'll start talking about the week 3 games in a minute. We got a couple more teams I want to look at. Now, 0-2 teams, Nate, since 1990, 0-2 teams only have 11% chance of making the playoffs. So these teams already, I hate to say it, their season may be on life support because if they lose this week, only 6 teams since 1980 have come back from 0-3 to make the playoffs. The last was the 2018 Texans. So if you go 0-3, your season's done. The first one I want to start with, and it's crazy. This is a good team. Both of you and I were high on them. The Cincinnati Bengals. They are 0-2 for the 3rd straight season. Now, the one year they bounced back, they made the AFC Championship game. Last year, they made it to 9-8. Burrow, I'm just not sure if he looks right. I don't know if it's T. Higgins is not playing. Jamar Chase, I want to get your take on him. He went after officials. I thought they were going to throw him out the game the way he was yelling at the officials. And defensively, other than Hendrickson, they really have some guys that really haven't stepped up yet. So what are we thinking in terms of the Bengals? I think their season's on the line this week. They host Washington on Monday Night Football. That's the second Monday Night Football game. So what do we think about the Bengals, contender or not?
I definitely think they're a team that will still make the playoffs. You look at them, like you were saying, every year they start 0-2 pretty much every single year, and they end up being completely fine. I think Joe Burrow like you were saying, he did not look good week 1, and people were concerned about the wrist. They saw all the videos of him picking up the water bottle funny and all that stuff. But I thought he looked pretty good against the Chiefs. Like you were saying, once they get back T. Higgins, their offense will be back to full support. And that defense, I mean, it looked pretty good against the Patriots. I know that's not saying much, but then they went up against Mahomes and held him to his lowest passing yardage total ever in his career, and also picked him off twice. So I think this is a team that I wouldn't be too worried about if you were a fan of this team, and I definitely think that they'll be coming back and making the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree with you. That was an aberration. They played terrible against New England week 1. They kind of looked past them, and New England surprised them, particularly doing this defense. Christian Gonzalez and those guys did a great job shutting down the Bengals receiving corps. But they lose to the Chiefs by 1 point, and they had their opportunities in this game. The Bengals, though, they got to find a running game. I know they lost Joe Mixon to the Texans. Zach Moss only had 12 rushes for 34 yards in this game. Joe Burrow was 258, 2 TDs, no interceptions. They may have found something with Gesicki. And how about that interception, Nate, by that Taylor Brute? The one-handed grab, that looked reminded me of Odell Beckham. So I kind of agree with you that the Bengals will be back, and they're still contenders. I had them winning that division. But right now, my Steelers pick may look good, but we'll see with Cincinnati because, as I said, we'll go run through their schedule. They have Washington at Carolina, 2 winnable games right there. Baltimore, whose season's maybe on life support by then, at the Giants, another winnable game. At Cleveland, another winnable game. Now, Cincinnati hosts Philadelphia in Week 8. Now, that's a game I'm really interested in. But yeah, I tend to think that the Cincinnati Bengals are still contenders. I'm looking at some of these other. There's some slop here though too. I just got to tell you, some of these teams. All right, I'll go with the Ravens. Now everybody's talking about Lamar Jackson, and he's only MVP to start 0-2 since I think like 2002. Are the Ravens going to be able to right the ship? They have so many great players defensively. They stepped away from Derrick Henry in this game. They were winning, and they were controlling the clock and everything against the Raiders. And then they tried to get cute, as you were saying, throwing the football when they didn't need to. And then next thing you know, the Raiders win the game, and Max Crosby sacking Lamar Jackson over and over again. So what do we think about the Ravens? Are they contenders, or is this a season where they're going to kind of take a step back?
I think it might be a year where they take a step back. I mean, that was a bad loss for them. And next week, like you were saying, they go into Dallas. This is a must-win game for them. Like you were saying, only 6 teams that started 0-3 had made the playoffs for 1. 2, they play in a stacked division. You saw everyone last year was above 500. I know you're not too high on the Browns, but the Browns always give them a good game. And then the Bengals, like we were just talking about, and the Steelers, you never know anything with the Steelers. They could pull anything out of the bag. So, and on top of that, they have their first place schedule, so they have one of the toughest schedules in the league. I think that this is a must-win game for them. And if they don't win this game, it might be the end of their season.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you have McDonald go out to Seattle as the new head coach. They lose him, and you start wondering about that defense. The pieces are kind of not fitting together. Yes, they have Hamilton and some of the other guys up front, but they got kind of pushed around in their losses. So they're at Dallas, huge game. They have the Bills in Baltimore week 4. That's a huge potential playoff battle. Cincinnati week 5. They have Washington. Then they have Miami. So it's going to be interesting to see. I'm sorry, they have Washington. Then they're at Tampa Bay on a Monday night, at Cleveland, Denver, Cincinnati again, and they're at Pittsburgh week 11. So we know that's a huge rivalry game, and they also play the Eagles on week 13. So that's Baltimore. We're really going to find out about them real soon. But right now, I'd have to say they're pretenders. Some of these other teams, we don't even need to get into. But I wanted to ask you, Carolina Panthers, they're 0-2. I know they're frauds, but I wanted to ask you about Bryce Young. I was talking about this earlier on Rich's show. Is this a situation where he was surrounded by five-star athletes? Is he another one of these first-round bonus quarterbacks that's just going to be a bust in the NFL? What are we seeing with Bryce Young?
Yeah, it's hard to say because I mean, if you look at the Panthers, they say that's where quarterbacks are going to die. You look at Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold. I mean, they're playing really well right now with other teams, and they were terrible with the Panthers. But I mean, he right now it's looking like he might be the biggest bust in NFL history, even over guys like even. I was watching a show today, and even guys like Jamarcus Russell still made plays. I don't think I've ever seen Bryce Young make like really good plays before, and he got benched this week. I feel really bad for him, but this is the NFL, and when you get compared to guys like CJ Stroud, your peers that you were drafted with, and you see how good CJ Stroud is, he's a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. There's just not enough patience for these guys, and you saw what happened. Dave Canales is done with him. He benched him, and I think they'll be drafting Carson Beck or Shador Sanders at the beginning of this year.
Wow. Yeah. And, it's crazy. Rich threw out a crazy scenario that he was saying the Dolphins should trade for him. Well, the thing is, what do you give for him? They gave up a boatload to get him, to get that pick from Chicago.
I mean, it would have to be something like maybe a second round pick or a conditional first round pick like the Jets did for Aaron Rodgers. But I don't think you could give much more than that based off his production because he just looks terrible right now.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you. And it seems like a really nice kid from California. And college football is easy. You know what I mean? You just out athlete people at the FCS level. And the thing is, Alabama had so many people around him. He could just throw that football. They remind me a lot of like Ken Dorsey, who was a coach for the Bills. But I remember him in college with the University of Miami Hurricanes. He had just so many first rounders around him. All he did was just throw the football up there and let those guys go get it. And he looked like he was a very good player in college, but just never made it in pros. So we'll see how it turns out for Bryce Young. I'll get your take on one other 0-2 team, Nate, and then we'll jump to the Week 3 games here in Lloyd Vance Insider Football. The Jacksonville Jaguars. Speaking of quarterbacks been taken number 1, Jacksonville Jaguars, Trevor Lawrence, he's another guy. He got the bag, man. He got a lot of money, and he just does not look right. Christian Kirk, who's on my roster, my fantasy roster, I don't even think he has 100 yards receiving in 2 games. He's really not stepping up. Ingram's been hurt for them, and Lawrence has played very shaky. I know they have Brian Thomas Jr., who's played very well. But what do you think about Trevor Lawrence and the Jacksonville Jaguars, pretenders or contenders?
They're pretenders. I mean, it's unacceptable the production that Trevor Lawrence is putting out right now. They give him that big contract, make him the highest paid quarterback in the NFL, and what do you get? I mean, he had under 50% completion this week. I mean, I understand that the O-line isn't very good and there's not very much of a strong running game, but that's just unacceptable. The hype around him, what he's supposed to be, that's all I hear about on these talk shows is what he's supposed to be and that his talent is outmatched against all these guys, but you don't see it on Sundays. And everybody keeps making excuses for him, but I just think he's a league average quarterback, and I think that's what he's going to be for his career.
And this is another loser leaves town match this week for Jacksonville. It's a huge game. Well, I wouldn't say loser leaves town, but they got a tough assignment. They're at Buffalo, so I would tend to think we can get into games in a minute, but that's Monday Night Football. That's a tough assignment. They're Oliver and the rest of those guys, they're going to be getting after Trevor Lawrence. So we'll see with that offensive line. But, yeah, that was fun talking about contenders and pretenders here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football. We're here with Nate Vance. We're on SR 1029 The Game and the Coastal Sports Network. Thank you, everybody, for joining with us. We're going to jump to Week 3, the upcoming week. We always look ahead in the last 10, 15 minutes of the show. So, Nate, I'll just kind of throw some of these games at you. I don't have the lines, but that's for another show. and then you can kind of let what you're thinking. Thursday night football. Gerard Mayo has he's surprisingly done a nice job. He's only 38 years old. He's a young guy. He seems to be relating to this team. They're a tough physical group led by Christian Gonzalez. Um, Jacoby Brissett is that veteran leader. So they're going to the Jets. The Jets are trying to reboot their season with Aaron Rodgers. Last week, they won the game, but the Jets, they look shaky at certain points in this game. So what are you thinking Thursday night football, the Patriots at the Jets?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a defensive battle, and I think it's just going to come. It's going to come down to the two quarterbacks, Jacoby Brissett versus Aaron Rodgers, and I think Aaron Rodgers will outplay Jacoby Brissett. I think it'll be a close game, but I got the Jets beating the Patriots on Thursday Night Football with a score of 20-16.
Oh, he's giving scores. All right. Yeah, and I tend to agree with you. I think that Aaron Rodgers is going to need to get on track. He's got to get the football to Garrett Wilson. He has not made enough plays with him. They do have Brees Hall, and then they do have, I wanted to ask you about Braylon Allen. He's only about a year older than you, which is incredible. He became the youngest player since like 1933 to score 2 touchdowns in an NFL game. What do you think about Braylon Allen? He's coming from the University of Wisconsin for the Jets.
Yeah, I mean that's just incredible, and like you were saying, he's only a year older than me, which is just crazy. And you're seeing these kids that are great coming out of high school. Like there's a receiver right now at Alabama. His name's Ryan Williams. I'm sure you have seen stuff about him. He's only 17 years old right now, freshman, and he's caught a touchdown pass in every single game. So I mean, these guys are just getting even better and better, and coming in younger, and they're still producing out here. So you got to give props to him.
Yeah, and the kid from Alabama, I think he left high school early, and like signed with them in January, and he's on the field right away. I don't even know if he's 18 yet. So you're right. At certain positions, I think at the skill positions like receiver, running back, you can be younger. Now, if you're talking about defensive line, offensive line, no way. Quarterback, definitely, there's a huge learning curve there as well. But at running back, receiver, you may see some of these younger guys come in the league. I still remember Larry Fitzgerald was very young when he came into the league as well. So, it can work out for some guys. All right, we're talking about week 3 games here in Lloyd Vance Insider Football. Nate, somebody's O's got to go. Houston is at the Vikings. Now, this one's going to be interesting because, as you said, Darnold has really stepped up for them. Kevin O'Connell's done a nice job in terms of turning around this offense. A lot of people have not believed in them. But Houston, that defense is getting after people. Right now, I'd have to say I'm leaning towards Houston going down there and win this one. They just have too many weapons with Diggs and Nico Collins and the rest of those guys. So what are you thinking in this one?
Yeah, I definitely think the Vikings coming off a very big win. I think the Texans are just going to be better in the bigger spot. I think C.J. Stroud's going to be better than Sam Darnold. And I just think C.J. Stroud's just going to outplay Brian Flores and his schemes and what he's trying to do on the defensive side of the ball. And I think they'll be able to get that running game going against them. So I'll definitely be picking the Texans to beat the Vikings this week.
All right. This is a huge one for the Philadelphia Eagles. I've listened over and over all day and here in the Philadelphia area, everybody complain about them, but they have a chance to right the ship. And if they win this game in New Orleans, shutting down the most explosive team in NFL right now, all is going to be forgiven for the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, this is a tough road trip. They got to be business-like in this one. I know you and I were talking about this a little bit earlier this evening. For some strange reason, this is a type of game the Eagles, when everybody counts them out, they win. They find a way to make it ugly. And I still am not sold on Derek Carr in terms of yes, he scored on like the first 15 drives of his season. He's been just incredibly efficient. The Eagles are going to have to find ways to get pressure on Derek Carr. That offensive line has some leaky spots. So Carter and the guys got to get it ramped up. Huge spot for the Philadelphia Eagles. I say they win this one. It may be an ugly win, but they win it on a field goal, so I'll go Eagles.
Yeah, I'm going to actually go the opposite of you. I think the Saints are a bad matchup for the Eagles. I think they have a really good defense, And I think that their offense is really explosive right now, and that the Eagles have a bottom 5 defense in the league. And I don't think they're just going to be able to stop them. I think Kamara is going to get going like he was doing last week against the Cowboys, and that'll open up the play action for Rashid Shaheed to go over the top against these corners and safeties that aren't, besides CJ Gardner Johnson, aren't very good. So I think the Saints win by a touchdown.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is this: that AJ Brown, the Eagles' number one receiver, he has a bad hamstring injury, and they're saying he may not play. So that's going to be a tough assignment if they don't have Nate. So you may have changed my mind, but for now, I'll stick with the Eagles. Uh, the Chargers 2-0. We talked about their physicality. Where they're going to Pittsburgh, another one that somebody's always got to go, and the Steelers have been physical defensively. TJ Watt is just a game wrecker. This is a tough one. I've been back and forth on this game. I think I'm going to go with the Chargers, though. I just think they just have a little bit more talent on their offensive side of the football, and then defensively, they're going to be able to. The Steelers' offensive line's been kind of leaky as well. I think the Chargers win this one, but it may be a close game, 20-17.
Yeah, I can't believe you didn't pick your Homer favorites, the Steelers, but I actually think that the Steelers are going to get this one done in Pittsburgh. I think that Mike Tomlin is going to outcoach Jim Harbaugh. I think he's going to.
Oh wow, nice.
I think that this defense is going to get after Justin Herbert, and I think that Justin Herbert's going to make one too many mistakes against his defense, and I think that Justin Fields will game manage his way to a win. I think the Steelers win by a field goal.
Yeah, and the thing is, Najee Harris has got to get going for the Steelers. Steelers need him to run the ball effectively, and then maybe they can get some play action to Pickens and find somebody else to throw the football to as well. Maybe Freiermuth, because their offensive line's got to do the job. You know, Bosa and Mack are going to be coming after them. So that's going to be one of the fun games this week to watch. All right, we have a couple more to go over before we wrap it up. The Denver Broncos. Well, I'll skip that one. I think Tampa Bay's going to win that. Let's go with the Miami Dolphins and Skylar Thompson traveling out to the Northwest to face the Seattle Seahawks. It's a 4:00 game on Sunday. What are we thinking here? I don't think Skylar Thompson, I don't think much of him. I think this is Seattle's opportunity to kind of put some legitimacy on their team, and they kind of keep moving forward. Geno Smith, crazy underrated. So I think Seattle wins this one. It may be close, but I'll go with Seahawks.
Yeah, I'm going with the Seahawks too. I think that they're going to expose that Dolphins defense. I don't think it's that is very good outside of a couple players that they got. They got Jalen Phillips, Javon Holland, and Jalen Ramsey. But besides that, their defense can get exposed, like you saw on Thursday Night Football. And then on top of that, I just don't, like you were saying, I don't think Skylar Thompson's going to be ready for the moment against. And I think Mike McDonald's going to cook up some schemes against him. He's a great defensive mind, and I think that they'll just be too much for the Dolphins. So I got the Seahawks winning too.
All right. Detroit trying to bounce back. They're real upset about losing at home to the Tampa Bay Bucks, but they got to move on. Huge game. They go out to the desert to face the Cardinals, who we're talking about are red hot right now. Then back and forth on this game. I will go with – I'm going to go with the Cardinals in an upset in this one. I think they're going to be a home dog. Kyler Murray's going to make some plays. But this is going to be a fun one to watch. I think a lot of offense.
Yeah, I'm going to be taking the Lions in this one. I think that Dan Campbell's going to have his team fired up after a loss that they probably should have won last week. And I think that Jared Goff is going to be able to have a really good game against this Arizona defense. I think they're going to be able to run the ball with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. And then the Lions defense hasn't been looking that bad this year. And the Cardinals' line is not very good. I think Aiden Hutchinson will be able to have another big game. Last week you saw him have 4.5 sacks. So I think he's a game wrecker. And I think that the Lions will beat the Cardinals on the road.
All right, loser leaves town match. As I said, Baltimore at Dallas. I think Dallas is going to have a bounce back here. It's going to be Dak throwing the football down the field as long as they can control Hamilton in the back part there. What are you thinking about Ravens at Dallas?
Yeah, I'm gonna take Lamar and the Ravens in this one. I think that this is a game that they need to have, and I think Jim Harbaugh is a way better coach than Mike McCarthy. and I think that he's going to come up bigger in the spot. And I think Lamar's going to have his way with that defense. He's going to get Derrick Henry going, and I think Dak is just going to make a couple more mistakes than Lamar in this game, and I think that the Ravens will go on the road and win this game.
All right, but last one we'll look at the Kansas City Chiefs 2-0 at the Atlanta Falcons. I'm going to say Patrick Mahomes is going to find a way to win this one, but Atlanta, you saw Kirk Cousins is starting to feel a little bit more comfortable for them.
I think this might be the upset of the week. I'm taking the Falcons to beat the Chiefs. I think that they looked really good, and they have a lot of momentum. They looked really good last night against the Eagles, and I think they have a lot of momentum going into this week. I think this is a spot where the Chiefs maybe mess up a couple of times, like you saw them do last year. No Pacheco, no Hollywood Brown, and I think that Mahomes is going to be under duress by that good Falcons defense. Matthew Judon having a really good season so far. So I think that Kirk Cousins will be able to get it done on Sunday Night Football.
Yeah, that's going to be a fun one to watch. So another great week here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, the Coast Sports Network. You know it's a good show because it went fast. So great job, Nate. Thanks for jumping on. For Kevin, we'll have you on more later in the season. Angel, great job behind the 1s and 2s. And we will talk to you down the road. So keep watching football, and we'll talk to you later next week here on Lloyd Vance Inside Football on 102.9 The Game, Coastal Sports Network.